if you've not been here, we're in a 5-part series, and lucky for you, this is the last part, so you don't have to hear me drone on and on about packing your bags. You get one part of it and we're done. But this series has been a series on how to prepare for what's next in life. Now, everybody has a what's next. You may not know what it is at this point, or you may know what it is. You know, it may be a what's next of a new relationship or a new job or retirement or any of those things. And we want to focus on not what the next is, but on how to prepare. And prepare has been the key word. Last week I talked about this. First week I talked about this. There's no necessary correlation between knowing what's next and being prepared for what's next. Knowing doesn't mean you're prepared. It just means that you know things. And we often get this confused. We often assume that we just know it, and so we're automatically prepared. That's not true. I'll talk to you about that in the case of marriage. You may know that you're getting married in June of next year. That does not mean that you're prepared for the next 30, 40, 50 years of your life. Like, not at all. So we want to be prepared for each of those seasons. And in keeping with our theme, we've talked about a different something that you can pack in your bags. Now, we've got a lot of bags up here, and there's some stuff in pretty much all of these bags up here. But we have talked about items each week that you can pack in your bag. One week we talked about an anchor. You got to have a pretty big bag to get the anchor in there. But we wanted an anchor that was strong enough to hold us when we were kind of all over the place. Another week we talked specifically about a prayer that we could put in our bags. Another week we talked about a community of people that we could put in our bags. And this week is no different. This week, I want us to pack our students. Now you're like, that's got to be a really big bag. Yes, it does have to be a really big bag. And students, yes, that is creepy that you're going to have to get in the bags with us as we prepare for the future. But that's what's going to have to happen. So today, in particular, we're going to talk about packing our students in our bags. Students, here's the deal. You are the key. You're the key ingredient in preparing us for whatever season of change lies ahead of us. That's a pretty heavy burden that rests on your back. Now, students, I want you to bear with me for a minute because I'm going to talk to other people in the room like you're not in the room. And I'm just going to need you to turn to them from time to time and be like, Dad, that's true. That is true about me. I need you to just confirm whatever I'm saying. So as I'm talking around you, know that I know you're in the room, and I just need you to help me out this morning as I talk around you. So this is true. Students are the key in our seasons of change, whether we're talking about our individual lives, whether we're talking about our lives as families, or whether we're talking about our church and community. And this morning, I don't have the opportunity or the time to talk about all those, so I'm just going to talk about the key ingredient in terms of our church and our community. If we are to be fully prepared for what's next, we need our children and our students to come along with us. Here's the deal, if we have a what's next in the future, then we need our children and our students to be with us. If they're not with us, then we don't have the what's next to begin with. Now, this isn't a shock to us. We hear this all the time. We know that students are our future. But here's the deal. If that's the case, then whenever we think about what's next, we will automatically think about them. But the problem, and here's the big problem, students are kind of like an investment, aren't they? I mean, parents, you know this. You had your child, and they didn't even let you take them out of the hospital without, like, dropping some big hard cash, did they? You know, like, you got to pay. I wrote the biggest check of my life about 2 days before I picked up Andrew. Like, I was like crying while I was writing that check out. It just kept going. You know, there's not enough room on the line to get. I'm like, really? You want to do this? But we know we got to drop some hard cash to do this. And then it doesn't stop there, right? You go home and you start the formula. Don't judge me. That's just reality for my life. And it costs a lot. And then after that, you get to daycare. Again, don't judge me. I got to do it. It's like I got to have some sanity. So we keep dropping the cash, and it just goes on and on and on. And we do this. Some of you got students who are teenagers now. You're like, yeah, they are like ridiculous eaters. This is insane how much they're eating. You do this. You don't say you do this way, but you do this because you're hoping for a return on your investment, right? Now, you're hoping that there is a good return at the end of the day. Like, you get old and you have to go to a nursing home. You're like, I'd really like it if you just take care of me. Like, can I just crash in your house for a while? Like, that's you know how much money I dropped on you when you were, like, 1 to 18? Like, I'm serious. At this point, I need the return. And that's good, and it's great if the return is good. But on the flip side, there's always a risk in investments, aren't there? Anybody ever invest? Anybody invest in tech stocks in the late 90s? Poor suckers, you were right there with me. Like, that's right. I was like 19 years old, and I thought, hey, this would be a good idea. Let me make an investment. I had some money. and I wanted to invest it. And so I talked to my aunt and uncle, and they're like, oh, there's these amazing things like tech stocks. And they said to get a mutual fund, but they wanted me to get a mutual fund that was just buried in tech stocks. And so I did. That didn't go up at all from day one. Like from day one, it was crash, 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 crash. That was a bad investment, wasn't it? I lost everything. In fact, my wife did not have quite the honeymoon that I had wanted for her because of that. Now, don't tell her I said that because I've never told her that, but that's reality. Like, because of that bad investment, I lost. And when I did, I lost bad. And I felt the pain of it. Now, some of you are looking at me like, I don't quite get where we're going with this generation. Let me put it in perspective in terms of the risk of this generation. Do you realize that just a few months ago, the class of 2017 was the last class to be born in the 1900s? You realize that? I'll settle in for you. That means that this upcoming class of 2018, this class was either born in 2000 or 2001. We will never have another 1999, 1990, whatever it was, you know. I mean, I'm sure you remember 1999. We were all packing bags then, weren't we? We had like 2,000 pounds of beans and a year's supply of water somewhere. We're like, everything's going to go apart. Like, we had it all. But that was 1999 for our bag students. You don't remember that because you weren't born then. That's the reality. You weren't around. Our students, they've never lived in a world that had monthly texting limits. Never. Like, you could say the lyrics, shake it like a Polaroid picture. They don't know what that means. Like, it's just completely over their head. The sad reality for these students until it comes to college and time for them to go to the showers in the dorm is that they have never lived in a world that does not have Crocs in it. That's true for them. Crocs have been a sad reality of their existence for all of their life. That's how depressed this society really is. Without a doubt, M&M could be their father. And that's not a candy for those of you who don't know that. That's not a candy at all. And in fact, if you don't know who M&M is, let me put it in better perspective for you. Glenn Campbell, who just passed away, he wouldn't be their grandfather. He'd be their great-grandfather at this point. That's the generation that we're talking about here. Now that I can see all the lights going off and it's starting to connect a little bit, the truth is most of the world around us sees this generation as a bad investment. Don't they? You hear this on the news. I watch videos about this. They see this generation as a bad investment. They see this generation as a problem. But when most of the world sees youth as the problem, we need to see them as the solution. But there's one caveat I would add to that. If we equip them, if we prepare them, if we coach them, if we mentor them, if we invest ourselves into them, they don't have to be the problem. They can be the solution. And that's why if we're going to be a church and a community with our eyes on the future and on what's next, prepared for what's next, we have no choice but to have our students with us. And even more than that, if you were sitting in the room this morning and you're like, I think there are major differences between my generation and that generation. If there are difficulties between our generation and the current generation, then we owe it to ourselves to, first of all, know what those differences are. But second of all, we owe it to ourselves to figure out what kind of world we've created that has led to those differences. In other words, we need to look at the role that we have played in creating the culture that is there around us. And as I thought about this more and more and tried to think of this in light of Scripture and what it meant to be passing on a mantle to the next generation, I couldn't help but think of the relationship that existed between Paul and Timothy. Now, some of you in the room might not know who Paul and Timothy are, so let me just kind of break this down really quickly. Paul was the individual who wrote over half the New Testament. He wrote 13 letters that are in the New Testament that we've locked in. He probably wrote more letters than that, but those are the ones that are left. He had this special relationship with Timothy. Paul was the one who was responsible for converting Timothy's family, his mother, his grandmother, Lois and Eunice. And along the way, Timothy came into the picture, and Timothy converted to the faith. They all grew up Jewish, but they became converts. Now, that's great. But Paul didn't stop there. He didn't stop by just saying, we need to get you to be a part of the faith. Paul took Timothy under his arm. He took him under his wing, and he started leading him and helping him grow in his faith, helping him own his faith. He took him on missionary journeys. He didn't just take him with him. He sent him on missionary journeys to different places. And then what's amazing about this relationship is the final letter that Paul ever wrote, guess who it was to? Timothy. That the last letter that I'm going to put out there, the one person that I need to talk to and consistently pass this faith on to before I'm dead and gone, before they take my life, is Timothy. I need to send him a letter. Now, this wasn't the only letter that Timothy got. He actually got 2 letters in the New Testament. And today's reading actually came from that first letter. And the passage that Lily read to us this morning is such an important passage in helping us get to this. Because Paul realized that there was going to be a temptation in Timothy's world for other people to look down on him because he's young. And so you probably noticed this in the reading, but in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 12, this is how Paul starts out. He says, "Don't let anyone look down on you because you're young." Now let me just stop right there. Paul understood the natural inclination of every previous generation. This isn't new to us right now. Every previous generation has the natural inclination to belittle the ability of the coming generation. We all do. Because we've done it better. We've got more life experience. We've got it all in. So there's this common anxiety that many of us hold when we think about handing over the reins to the next generation. And that's not new. But Paul also knew that the only way the story of faith will ever be recorded and told again and again is if we embed that story in the next gen. That's why he went on to say this. He said, "Don't let anybody look down on you because you're young, but rather set an example for the believers." Now let me pause here because this is one of the most incredible images that he gives. If you go back to the original Greek, that word there, example, is actually tupos. It's where we get the word type from, or type print, something like that. Literally, here's what it means, and I kind of translated it over for you. Don't let anyone look down on you because you're young, but become a type or an imprint for the faithful. He says, here's the visual image. Just like you would have a piece of wood or a piece of pottery that you would then like hammer something into, chisel it into, bind it into, just dig it into, whatever it is, however you would write back in those days. That's what I want you to become, Timothy. I want you to become a type and an imprint where someone looks at you and they see the story of faith. You see, for Paul, that was super important because he understood that the stories of the past are carried into the present by the generation of the future. Sometimes we get this wrong. Sometimes we think that comes by our memories. Like we're able to carry the stories of our faith through our memories and through the good old days and all the things that we remember going by. And sometimes we think that the stories of our faith are preserved in our traditions and the way we've always done it and how we've gone through our worship. Sometimes we think that it's in our writings. It's in our recordings, all these things. But Paul says, no. It's in the youth. This visual demonstration that our stories will only be told in the future if we impress them upon the generation that's coming up. It's not through our traditions. It's not through our memories. It's not through our writings even. It's through this generation. And we know this. We know that all generations are impressionable, don't we? I mean, that's something we say a lot. They're impressionable. They're an impressionable young person. We get it. But when it comes to the point where we really want to impress our faith onto young people, onto our next generation, that's where we stop short. So this naturally begs the question, what imprint have we left on this generation? Now, hopefully our story of faith has left an imprint, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I think our society has probably already left an imprint. And before we can get to an idea of what imprint should be left by the church, I think we owe it to ourselves to know what imprint is already there. And I'm going to go through a list of 5 things really quickly. These didn't come from me originally. They're from a sociologist by the name of Tim Elmore, and he's really concerned about the next generation and making sure they win. And he put these in such like a common sense way that I just want to bring them to you. And you're going to see them on the screen and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense, that makes sense, that makes sense. But the question is, what imprint have we left and how are they interpreting it? And we can go from there. So our scene today, and he did this sort of in an acronym so it helps us out. Here's how it goes. Their world is full of, and so they assume this. Here's the first one. Their world is full of speed. Their world is full of speed. Now, anyone in this room would agree, yeah, we want things faster, don't we? I'm frustrated to death right now because I've got 6 megabytes of internet coming to my house. Why? Because I think I should be faster. Like I think it should be faster coming in, and it's not. And so what that naturally does is creates an environment where we assume that slow is bad. Because we've said everything needs to be faster and faster and faster. Every phone that we get, every time we update our phones, they're faster than the former model, right? They might not have a whole lot of change in the body, but internally they're going to be a faster unit. And because of that, the idea is that slow, anything that comes slow, anything that surrounds us in slow is naturally bad. The second thing that we have communicated in our world is that the world is full of convenience. And if everything is convenient, then hard is bad. Now, if you're a K-12 teacher, you know this to be true, but the number one statement that K-12 teachers, educators get here in America is this: this is too hard. Anybody ever heard that? This is too hard. It's too much. And the reason that comes out is not because this generation just doesn't want to struggle with difficulty. It's because we've told them that convenience is good. The world is full of convenience. You can get whatever you want at your fingertips. If you got Amazon Prime, get it in 2 days, baby. Like, it's coming to you. It's convenient. I don't even have to leave my house. They just bring it. I'm waiting for the day they'll bring a drone over my house and drop a box within 30 minutes. Like, it's convenient. It will happen, folks, even here in the Washburn community. You just wait and see. There'll be little drones everywhere, especially at my house, because I order from Amazon ridiculous amounts of time. But we're convenient, and when we're convenient, hard is bad. Number 3, the world is full of entertainment, and therefore boring is bad. Now, this is what's fascinating about this. We all know this is true, and entertainment is not a bad thing, and there's certain really good parts of it. But when we communicate that boring is bad, it's the points in our life, and neuroscientists will tell you this, it's the points of boredom in our life that we are most creative. It's those times when we have lulls in our activity, when we have margin in our calendar, when we're not always taking in, that we develop creativity and we harness it and we go forward. If we've got all the clutter around us, all the lights and the entertainment constantly coming our way, then really what's happening in that moment is we're only thinking of ourselves and we're not thinking creatively of others. And so we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot by setting up this paradigm where we say everything is entertaining, everything's instantly entertaining, and we've stopped. And in light of that, everything that is boring is bad, and therefore we've stopped the creativity that could come. The fourth element that Elmore mentions is nurture. Our scene today, the world is full of nurture, and therefore risk is bad. Now, I know that not every child is nurtured. I get that, and there's exceptions to this rule, and there's no problem with that. And we want to protect, right? We naturally do want to protect. But I went out to eat last night with John and Savannah, and as we sat down, it wasn't good enough for my wife to put on a bib on my son, right? She put on an entire shield that wrapped him. Like, it went down to here and had, like, elastic on the arms right here. He came out of swinging, you know. He's, like, got it wrapped around. There's nothing going to get on him. Next thing I know, we're going to have, like, a helmet at the house that he's going to put on what he eats in case he throws something in the air. Why? Because we want to protect so much. And that's good. Protection is good. But in the midst of that, we've said that risk is bad. You realize this is the most risk-adverse generation that has ever come around? They don't want to risk anything, which is a little bit ironic because it's also the most entrepreneurial generation that we've ever seen. It's like, what? Wait a minute. They want to do it, but they don't want to do it. They want to go out there. And what we see happening in this environment, and you can see more of this from Tim Elmore, but he says that leads to high levels of arrogance and extreme high levels of low self-esteem. They think they can do it, but when they get in there to do it, the risk hits, and immediately the low self-esteem kicks in, and it becomes problematic. And so we've set up a culture where we want to nurture and nurture and nurture, and we've never let them risk anything, and because of that, we've ultimately cut ourselves off at our ankles. And then finally he says, and again, I know this is not for every generation or every person even here. Students, none of you are this way, so let me just say that right away. I know none of you are in this. Finally, we said the world is full of entitlement, and because of that, labor is bad. I deserve this purely because I'm here. I just get it, right? This is the generation that grew up, we didn't have to work for a trophy. We just got a trophy because we were out on the field. And we say that's great, and we don't want to hurt self-esteem in any regard, but now we're like giving out trophies and ribbons because you put your dish in the dishwasher, like after your meal, like, oh, yay. And in creating that culture, what we've naturally done is we've said that labor is bad. But here's the fascinating thing. Here's the irony behind this entire list. If you look at these, slow, hard, boring, risk, labor, you know and I know that these are the very things that help grow us into good adults. These are the ingredients that when mixed properly can help us go further, faster, but we have stripped them away from our generation because we have replaced them with other things. And I say we because the burden really does fall back on us. The second irony to this is that we are responsible for creating this high-tech world that is leaving these impressions. We've wanted things that are faster. We've wanted things that are more convenient. We've wanted more entertainment. We've wanted some nurture every now and then when my feelings are hurt. We want the entitlement and just to feel like we can get it. And we wanted all these things ourselves, and what we've done is inadvertently created a generation that assumes certain things in reverse. Something we never wanted. And I think Paul does an incredible job, and this is where I'm going to jump back to 1 Timothy chapter 4 for a minute. Paul does an incredible job of setting up 5 impressions that Timothy needs to leave, that if we will leave those same impressions, we will be able to overcome these 5 things. He goes on in Timothy, and here's the rest of the verse. But set an example for believers in these 5 areas: in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. So let me just bring this home really quickly for you. I think these 5 areas, speech, conduct, love, faith, and purity, if aligned correctly, can be the key ingredients to help us overcome those 5 areas of impression that society is less. And here's how we'll do it. Here's how we can lead the next generation well. Number 1, in our speech, don't think lecture, think lab. If any of you remember back to chemistry class, the most exciting part was not when the teacher was up there droning on and on, was it? It was the point where you got to burn your eyebrows off. Like, it's the most exciting thing you have ever done, is to watch that explosion take place, because you actually got to put your hands on it and get dirty. Labs have this ability to be exciting and engaging, and if our voices are going to be heard, then the voices of our next generation are eager to be used. As long as we're lecturing, they're never going to get to use those voices. Kids aren't looking for a lecture today. They want experiences. They want to be able to get their hands dirty and try it out. I mean, think about it for a minute. They're the generation that has social media at their fingertips. Like, they can get their voice out there. Everybody can see it. Millions of people can see it. And in fact, they try desperately to try and get millions of people to see their videos and trying to get them to go viral. They want their voices to be heard. And if we're going to parent in this way, then we have to allow experiences to open the door for conversation, and not conversation to go in the opposite direction. I mean, think about this. Next time, if you go out and you're traveling, or you're meeting with new influential people, if you're serving together, if you're watching a movie, what if you just did those things? If you experienced them together and then afterwards had a conversation about what the experience was like, what that engagement was like? What if we just flipped it for a moment and gave them the opportunity to have experience and then moved into conversation? The second area, not only in our speech but also in our conduct, I want you to not think, do it for them, and think, do it with them. Think about the old Home Depot model. You've probably seen this out there. It's a mantra that I think parents and teachers need to adopt everywhere. You can do it and we can help. Remember that? You can do it, we can help. That's what we're here for. You can do this, students. You've got the ability to do it. You may stumble a long way, but that's okay. We all do. But we're here to help and guide you on the other end of things. Healthy and robust self-esteem, it is said by the APA, healthy and robust self-esteem actually come from achievement, not merely affirmation. And so giving students the opportunity to do it and do it with them is actually the path that we need to take. We don't need to do it for them. We have to parent in this way for the long term, and not just for the event that's right here, but allowing students to learn skills and to get involved in the community around us so that they'll be able to own those skills in the future. The third area is faith. Don't think entertain, think equip. Now, I'm not saying entertainment's bad. In fact, hopefully I've been somewhat entertaining this morning, except for some of you are falling asleep. I get that. Sometimes that's a problem. But hopefully we're entertained. But in the context of being entertained, we don't want to give up being equipped, and we don't want to just avoid boredom in life. Even in church, right? Sometimes it's okay to be entertained. But what we should be thinking long term is, how do I prepare, or how do I equip my young person for the future? And the reason that we don't always think that is because we assume that entertainment is where happiness is found. In the moment, I'm entertained, so I'm happy. And we don't consider the fact that happiness is really a pursuit of meaning and purpose and all of those things. And if we'll shift our focus to saying, I'm trying to equip you to live a life that is fulfilled, and not just in a moment where you're entertained or taken care of or satiated, but I want you to have long-term fulfillment. And because of that, I'm going to equip you with certain things. Here's a shocking thing for you. This is under the next category, love. Don't think protect, think prepare. Now again, we should protect. I get it. We shouldn't put helmets on at dinner. That's a little excessive. I'll just draw the line right there. But we need to make a shift from be safe to be ready. Do you realize this is no joke. This is for real. Baltimore Sun came out with an article this past year. 80% of college graduates, guess where they moved when they were done with college? Home. They're back home. That is a generation that is way too protected, folks, right? If we shift our focus, if we think of love in terms of this long-term success, instead of thinking of love in just this moment where we're protecting and offering protection, but really we're preparing students long-term, this is really the greatest gift we can give them. The greatest gift of love that we can give them is to get them out of your house and standing on their own 2 feet, right? And none of us would really disagree with this, but it's a simple shift from protect to prepare. And then finally, in regards to purity, don't think cool, think real. Don't think cool, think real. A college student said to a professor one time, he was saying, you know, what's bad about me coming up and being cool? He says, here's the deal, and this is the college student talking at this point. He says, you know what, the only thing worse than you being uncool is you being unreal. There's a generation that is craving authenticity, and we have confused purity with this whitewashed look that says, I've got my act together, I'm looking good, I've got the, you know, and it doesn't always have to be like the trendiest clothes or something like that. It just means that I've got my life together and in a line and all these things. And we assume that that's purity. When our generation around us is craving an authenticity that says, I fall apart sometimes, but I have the grace of God to back me up. I don't get it right all the time, but I've got the grace of God that's there. And the truth is if we are going to be a community that is seeking the young people around us, we've got to be a community that is trying to be authentic with where we are and who we are. So in the end, here's where I would sum it up. I think we all win when we help the next gen win. But the only way to get that win is we have to shift our thinking. We have to shift how we're preparing them. We have to shift the impressions that we're making on this society. You know, this is the first generation of students that don't need your information. Right? Students used to come to you and be like, hey, I don't know what this is. They don't do that anymore. Why? They can find information on their own. They don't need us for information anymore. But they do need us for interpretation of the world. They do need us for insight. Leonard Sweet said it this way. He says, they don't need us to access information, but they do need us to process information. We will be the ones who give them the context to the content that they have gathered. And that's okay. But when we do that, that means that we have to have a shift. And as a community of faith, let me say this. This is where we are heading. As a community, I want this to be a place where we are a live lab for students. A place where they can experiment with their faith and with their life, and they can be welcome to do that in our environment. We'll follow up with conversations afterwards. That's great. But at this moment, we want to give them the tools. We want to hand the mic over to them. We want to hand the reins over to them. We want to make sure that they know they are a central part of this community and they can experiment here with us. As a community, we stand ready to equip. We'll have fun. We'll laugh. We'll be entertained. But ultimately, we know that true happiness doesn't come in the moment. It happens over a lifelong. It happens as we're prepared for the future. As a community, we will protect, but we will be a place of preparation, which means sometimes our students will fall down, and we'll be there to watch them fall down. We'll also be there to help them get back up. And ultimately, we'll be a community of authenticity, a place where we say we all need the grace of God. And none of us are whitewashed, and none of us are perfect, and we're all coming at this together. And we'll stand alongside with our students and with the next generation, and we will say, I got you. I know where you're at. And I know that there's a God who is ready to extend his arms of grace to you. And we need a lot of help with this. You know, last I heard, the ratio that we need of adults and students is 1 to 5. That's 1 student for every 5 adults. 1 student for every 5 adults is what we need investing in the lives of our students. Kara Powell did this incredible book. It's called Sticky Faith. And in it, she says that there are a few keys to making sure that students have lifelong faith. And that's one of the keys. That when our students graduate, when the class of 2018 graduates next year, that we send them off with 5 adults in their bags. Students, that is a really big bag. If you got 5 of us coming with you, that's huge. But you need 5 of us to go along with you in order to have lifelong success. And as a church, that's the ratio I want. That's what we want to establish. We're going to become that community. In fact, you'll see in your bulletins this morning a little insert that says, together we make the difference. Together we make the next gen. And on the back of it, it's just a simple sign up for Wednesday nights. Starting in September after Labor Day, we're actually going to start shifting all of our Wednesday nights to where that is a night dedicated entirely to students. If you want Bible study, if you want some gathering, we're going to do that on another night. We're going to get together on another night. But as a community of faith, here's what I want. I want us to dedicate ourselves to the next gen. And so everybody who comes here on Wednesday night, we're going to dedicate ourselves to the next gen because we're going to see them win. And we're going to do it together. There's opportunities on the back for Sunday morning and Wednesday. And at the end of service, we'll have a couple of our children workers in the back. You can fill these out, hand them to them if you want. They'll be in contact with you. But that's where we're going. And not only are we going to dedicate Wednesday night to that end, but we will also dedicate this morning in prayer over them. Students, I know there's a whole host of emotions that go along with coming back to school. Some of you are excited. Some of you are nervous. Some of you are not quite sure what your teacher is going to be like. And I want you to know, students, your church is with you. Your church is for you. Your church has got your back as you go forward and you face the many things that are lying before you, whether it's temptations or bullying or upset days or, close to broken necks. Colby, thank you very much for not doing that. We're with you. And we're there to say we want the next gen to win because we know we all win when that happens.